there was talk of a tour across Canada, and of course I was very excited.
So I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and when I got out of bed, now this sounds really corny, I said, Greg, this is your date with destiny.
I was flown to New York to audition for Hal Prince on Broadway.
But you never know in this business whether people like you or not. The business is 99% rejection.
There are so many variables in why you get a job or you don't. You know, you might be too tall or too blonde or too young or too old or have too high a voice, or you may look like someone that the director hated and he may not want to cast you for that reason.
And I'd never been to New York before, so I was really excited and thrilled. And the next thing I knew, I was on the stage in this theater.
Hal Prince had us stop, and he turned to one side, looked at the people that were with him, then he turned at the other side, looked at the people, and then he said, boys, come down off the stage.
I had sung for Hal Prince a year ago in the spring for the part of Raoul, and he told me I was too old.
Then he did something which is unprecedented. He offered us the roles right there.
2 days later, I was in Garth Drabinsky's office, and he was offering me the part of the alternate for Christine.
And at that moment, I knew that, wow, they do like me.
And suddenly, a year later, after having been told that I was too old and not right for the role, suddenly I was perfect.
So it was kind of a whirlwind series of events that ended with kind of what I think is like a fairy tale story come true.
My agent asked the casting people about what, made me perfect. Suddenly, a year later, the response was, that's show business.
Everyone in the theater lives for the excitement of the first night when we get to perform our show for a real audience. And when you, the audience, come to see The Phantom of the Opera, we would like you to have the greatest experience you've ever had, something that will stay with you for the rest of your life. The theater has that power to affect people, and when I say theater, I'm not just referring to the actors on stage. Many, many people have given their all to create the show you'll be seeing today. And just how an amazing piece of theater like Phantom gets made is itself a wonderful story. There are some enormous talents behind this show. Most likely you've heard of Andrew Lloyd Webber, the composer of Cats and Evita, whose original idea it was to make a musical of The Phantom of the Opera. Harold Prince is probably the most celebrated director on the contemporary Broadway stage. And then there's Maria Bjornson, who first envisioned the fantastic sets and costumes for Phantom. But over 700 other people, the best in the business, have contributed their talents and their skills. And in the next 40 minutes, I will introduce you to some of them. Actors, musicians, directors and choreographers, mask makers, wig masters, carpenters, sound engineers, and explosives experts. And each one is just as important to the creation of the theatrical experience as is the actor. Currently, there are 2 Canadian companies of The Phantom of the Opera. The original production, which opened in September 1989 in Toronto, and which is still running at the restored historic Pantages Theatre. And this, the national touring production, which is playing extended engagements in major cities across Canada. It takes over 100 people to put on each performance of The Phantom of the Opera, and I will be introducing you today to members of both companies. You will also meet the creative team which was responsible for staging these 2 productions. The actors you will see at work in rehearsal come from both the Toronto and touring companies. So while you're enjoying this video presentation, I'll be here in this dressing room, putting on my makeup and costume, and later today, you'll see me in my role as the Phantom of the Opera.
Music sings songs in my head.
The angel of music sings songs in my head.
When an actor comes to a new musical production, first he'll read the score, and together with the musical director, he'll sing the musical score over and over until it becomes a part of him.
And I have been visited by the angel of music.
Oh, there's no doubt of that. But now we go to supper.
Then comes the day when he meets the director, the person whose job it is to bring this huge project to life.
That's the same note I gave you in the cemetery scene. Don't sneak up. Make everything decisive.
For the Phantom of the Opera, that man was Harold Prince. Hal met with me and my co-stars Patty Cohenauer and David Rogers very early in the rehearsal process as we were exploring ideas and trying to better understand our characters.
Excellent to there. Now turn front sharply and then back up neatly.
Sorry, that's it.
I mean, come on. Saying is not yet.
Not yet. With a production as large and as detailed as The Phantom, one person could not possibly do it all. So Harold Prince has delegated his responsibilities to a team of directors, the music director, the choreographer, the stage manager, and most of all, to his longtime associate, Ruth Mitchell.
Yeah, I need more terror to know that you really feel them. You know,
Ruth has worked on the productions in London, New York, and around the world. She knows the show inside and out. Ruth and music directors Jeffrey Heward and Derek Bate guided Patty and myself through the early rehearsals as we worked out our movements on stage and learned the emotional nuances of the relationship between the Phantom and Christine.
Touch me, trust me, savor each sensation.
Christine is particularly difficult because she has a tremendous range that has to be played, beginning with an innocence, because you have to start with a very naive, innocent, young, vulnerable woman who, throughout the evening, matures and becomes impassioned because of the Phantom, her relationship with both the Phantom and Raoul. So my challenge on this particular portrayal has been to give her somewhere to develop too, and then paint the palette and the colors and grow her into this amazing woman who's learned so much.
Long before Patty and I went into rehearsal, the craft shops had begun their work on the other elements that go into the show, the costumes, the sets, and the props. But what exactly do we mean by these terms? Well, imagine you are in your room at home. Now take everything out of it, so you have bare walls, a bare floor, and bare windows. Now the clothes you're wearing as you're standing in the empty room would be your costume. The room itself would be the set, and when you put all your stuff back in, all your records, the curtains, the bed, even your posters, these things are called props. Many of the props for the Phantom came from a Toronto shop called Rabbit's Choice, named after a very special rabbit who belongs to props manager Fina McDonald.
In a play like Phantom of the Opera, obviously we're not just dealing with beds and chairs and tables. We get to do more fantastical stuff, more interesting stuff. We get to make whips and elephants and music boxes with monkeys on them. He's the Phantom's companion. He lives in the Phantom's lair, and he plays a tune that we associate with the Phantom. And we molded his face out of plasticine, then made a plaster cast, and then poured rubber latex into the plaster cast and built up his face. He's sheepskin. All of his fur is sheepskin, with the exception of the little stand of hair at the top of his head and his side whiskers. Those are human hair. All of the trim on his jacket is antique trim, and it came from England with the costume designer. One of the really neat things about props that I enjoy is you get to take very ordinary stuff and transform it into very extraordinary stuff.
It's a bust of Schubert that goes on the piano at which the Phantom plays. I painted it with a bronzy gold color, and I'm going over it with a dark brown wash to give it a bit of age, to make it look like it's a bronze cast, basically.
Certainly everything that we've built has been incredibly detailed and decorated and very precise and elaborate, which is another challenge. and has been a lot of fun to do.
So we want to disguise it in that curl?
Well, it'd be great if we could. I acted professionally for, I guess, almost 10 years. Worked as a stage manager, worked in wardrobe for a while, and then fell into props. But I think the thing to do is to find a theater company and ask if you can volunteer your services. And if after a week or a month or a year of doing boring, mindless, repetitive junk, you're still interested, you've got a good chance of working in the business.
Most of us like to express ourselves by the clothes we wear, and today's fashion does have its extremes. But whether it's punk or designer clothes, what we wear today is nothing compared to what was worn in past centuries. The period costumes in The Phantom of the Opera are amongst the most beautiful ever created for the stage. And for Anne Ellsbury, helping to create the costumes for the original Toronto production was a wonderful opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. This is the most detailed show I have ever worked on. I mean, there's detail on detail on detail. There's an incredible, I mean, it's the biggest show for braid. There must be hundreds of miles of braid used on this show. There are approximately 220 costumes in the show. Most of these costumes, there's at least 200 hours on a costume.
This is from the Don Juan scene, and it belongs to Piangi, who is one of the leads in the Paris Opera Company. And it's made of a lot of contemporary fabrics, but there's a very beautiful Indian fabric in here with the beadwork. It's quite marvelous.
The very first thing you do is you look at the sketches with the designer and sort of figure out what fabrics you want to use. And then there's the shopping. We bought a lot of antique trimmings and stuff like that, and antique costume pieces which have since been chopped up and used in little pieces. Some of them have been used as is, but not a lot.
This is the half-man, half-woman hat, and it'll be worn in the masquerade scene. And the masquerade scene is full of wonderful and odd and crazy, spectacular costumes.
Barry! Is that Barry? Barry!
Oh, I like that.
Something happens, especially when the costumes are as wonderful as this, designed so beautifully and the fabrics are so rich, that as soon as you put on a slave master's costumes, for example, one of my own, and you have leather armbands all over and spikes around your head and this huge leather whip, and I mean, you can't but help but sort of start strutting in front of the mirror and practicing with it. And it's wonderful. Costumes definitely, especially when they're as fine as this, add a lot.
Many of the special effects that you see on stage, the fires, explosions, fog, and smoke, involve pyrotechnics. Phantom relies on pyro tricks as much as a modern rock show does. To create these effects, we called on a master of incendiary magic, pyrotechnics expert Doug Adams.
Geez, we've done everything from Iron Maiden and Van Halen to Level 42, The Cult. This endless. There's so many of the rock bands out there that like the pyro. It's very intricate because everything's run underneath the stage. And it's a lot of lines run, and it's a lot of changes that have to be done at the last minute. I like the aerial effects, the starburst, airburst, or waterfall effects, because a lot of times the audience doesn't expect things to go off above their heads in a theater or, you know, in a concert venue. Safety's the first thing. You know, safety has to come first. If there's an accident with pyro, it's not the same as having a miscue with a lighting call. Somebody can get hurt if they're at the wrong place at the wrong time. The pyrotechnician can't see the stage. There's an actor in front of it or on it, on the effect, and it's detonated. If it's not safe, it doesn't happen.
Because we want the look of the show to be as authentic as possible and true to its period, almost every actor in The Phantom wears a wig on stage, at least for part of the time. Some of the supporting actors may wear 5 or more wigs in their various roles. Whether that wig resembles his or her own hair or a beehived mountain of curls, wig making and maintenance are critical to the show. Laurie and Doreen Freeman served as the wig masters for over a year in Toronto, and for them, working on the Phantom was a great experience.
It's like a wig maker's dream, isn't it, really? You know, you look at it and you think, oh, wow, we can do all these different periods, we can do all these different styles.
There are between 70 and 80 wigs. This is a raw wig. This is the way I receive the wig. And then it's cut and styled. First, you have to meet with the designer or the designer's assistant, go through the sketches, through the designs, and the wig is made, and then that's my job to, as I say, interpret the sketch.
Sometimes you come up with better ideas than what the designer has, too. You know, the designer sees it one way, but Doreen is extremely experienced with period hairstyling, so sometimes she does something and the designer will just say, ah, that's even, you know, that's better. We were reading one of the books and you came across the fact that they comb their own hair over the front of them a lot to give a natural look, and yet people who had their own hair would powder it to look like a wig, so that they looked wealthier and could afford wigs. And the term big wig came from the fact that if you were very wealthy, you could afford a very big wig.
This is the half man, half woman for the masquerade.
Hi, Mark. You need me for something, huh? Yeah. Ooh, that looks great. Man-woman today.
It's the first time I've seen this.
You can't just willy-nilly put a wig on someone and say, go out on the stage. If that person's uncomfortable, it can, you know, make them feel very poor on stage, and consequently their performance will suffer.
Unfortunately, a lot of actors have, they've had to wear some terrible wigs in their time. And their initial thing about wigs is, oh no, I don't have to wear a wig, do I? Until they get one on that's been made for them. And it's like, well, they're so thrilled. They can put it on and feel like that person.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Thank you.
While the craft shops are busy making their props, wigs, and costumes, the acting company must be brought together to start work on the blocking, or physical staging, of the show. The actors rehearsed in Toronto, in part, under the watchful and caring eye of resident director Anne Allen and her team of stage managers. The stage manager is the one person the director can count on to know about every detail of the production that will appear on the stage. He or she guides each rehearsal, and when we go into the theater itself, the stage managers call the cues for the whole show and keep the performance running smoothly. Like athletes preparing for a race, actors have to warm up every day before they get down to work. An athlete might pull a muscle. Well, for us, it could be a leg or a shoulder, or that most valuable muscle of all, the voice. And the directors have designed special exercises to get us into shape.
All right, come on then, let's get these bodies into gear. Count down, 1, and up, and smooth, warm.
Anne Allen likes to conduct a warm-up program for everyone.
Up. That comes later, with both arms down, 1, and reach, down.
The first thing is it brings everybody together as a company. So you don't start the day separate, you're all in, come together as a company, and you're all going towards the one aim. Secondly, they've got to get their bodies strong because there's an awful lot of movement required. It's 8 shows a week, it's a long time. So I kind of devised a warm-up which would slowly get them going and concentrate on getting their centre strong, being able to breathe correctly so as they can move and sing. So we keep it light. Everybody has a little bit of fun, but we're all working, nevertheless. We're all working and we're all gaining towards one aim.
This side, A1, A2, A.
Just a slide, and.
Music director Jeffrey Heward also has his own special way of conducting vocal warm-ups.
Good. Panting. Giddy, 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 and giddy, 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 giddy.
Because it's hard in a rehearsal, you repeat and you repeat and you repeat. And we don't want their voices to be tired. Well, hopefully they'll learn a system so that when we do the show, they can warm themselves up and feel good about their voices every night. want the barriers to be broken down so as actors they relate to each other. So in the process of putting them in the circle the way I do, you know, they watch each other and they begin to listen to each other. They stop thinking about my part, my acting, my voice, and they think about our show and our performance.
In these intensive rehearsals, we are working to give Phantom a life of its own. Each actor's part must fit with the others to make the production work. Every word and every movement must be fine-tuned. Ruth, Anne, and Jeffrey work with one mind to create the perfect illusion.
Rehearsals are always hard. Trying to develop a character, find the character. You go through periods of self-doubt and saying, oh, I'm the only one in the cast that doesn't know what he's doing, and look what everybody else is doing. But then finally you say, oh, that's what he is. You know, that's who the character is. That's you.
A lot of hard work. I mean, that's the hardest work of all. It's strange because that's also the most creative period. You get to try new things. Even if the show's been done before and the director's done it before, he may want to see what you can bring to it. And whether you're a singer or a dancer, if you've got a lot to do in the show, those days are just horrendous because it really wears you down. So rehearsal periods are very hard, but they're also very creative. So you have that sort of split focus, and it takes a lot of your energy, and all you can do is go home and sleep at the end of the day so you can be fresh for the next morning.
As opening night approaches, the pressure is on the company to perfect the performance. But if it weren't for the producers who invested the money to mount this production, and whose imaginative marketing efforts created the excitement to entice you, the public, to buy your tickets, we would not have an audience for whom to perform. Phantom has become an incredible success because of the persistence of its producers. Garth Drabinsky, chairman of the Live Entertainment Corporation of Canada, had the long-range vision of bringing the Phantom to Toronto, and then emboldened by its phenomenal success, to take the unprecedented step of mounting a second Canadian company for a simultaneous national tour. For Toronto, his plan started with the purchase and complete restoration of the historic Pantages Theatre. This was the perfect venue for Phantom.
We did not have, in Toronto, the inherent audience base of New York or London, which relies so heavily on the tourist industry. And therefore, we have had to be much more aggressive and much more inventive in terms of our marketing approach to this show. It was our intention, through every advertising medium possible, to blanket the country, to saturate Canada with the idea of Phantom of the Opera, using its superb logo as the basis of every campaign. We've spent a great deal of time involved with corporate sponsorship programs. Our relationships with American Express, with Pepsi-Cola, and recently with Canadian Airlines has again broadened the horizon of the show, allowed us to reach the broadest client base possible. In the case of the record album, for example, that was very much part of a solution to a new marketing problem in terms, again, of continuing to establish in the minds of the consumer that this country was generating a first-class production of Phantom of the Opera.
When the Toronto production of Phantom of the Opera originally opened in September of 1989, it had the largest box office advance ticket sale anywhere in the world.
Based upon the strength of the run of the show at the Pantages Theatre, which is going to continue for quite some time, There was no way in the foreseeable future that we saw the Phantom of the Opera being able to reach the excited audiences in Vancouver and Calgary and Ottawa and Montreal who displayed a major thirst for the show. And it's a thirst that we created through our own successful marketing campaign. And therefore, the decision was made quite simply to mount a second production while the show was very, very hot in the minds of Canadians. Phantom of the Opera is going to prove to be a landmark. By the time it finishes playing in Canada, the show will have grossed at the box office the level that E.T. grossed in North America at the movies. And that's just out of Canada.
The phenomenal success of Phantom has been achieved through hard work and discipline, but also something more.
In any entrepreneurial activity, what is necessary is a tenacious character, one that is very aggressive and one that is not willing to compromise on the one hand or give up on the other in the face of the difficulties that are obviously going to be put in your way as you tackle the task at hand.
While the producers have been busy promoting the show and the actors have been in rehearsal, the designers and the technical crews have also been putting in long hours, preparing the sets, the lighting, and effects for a show which has been acclaimed as the most elaborate ever designed for the musical stage. Ian Poole is the production director.
I'm essentially responsible for all the production elements for Phantom of the Opera. This includes not only the sets and props, but also the costumes, the lighting, the sound, all the technical effects, the special effects. So the show runs night after night consistently at the high quality.
Mistakes in the planning stage can be costly later on. So even before we have the real theater to work in, there is another theater, a scale model complete with miniature sets and props.
The model is actually a working tool for the piece. It's used, first of all, for the designers to give them the visual aspects and the dimensions and the proportions that they're looking for from theater to theater. Secondly, it's used for the shops to give them a dimensional view of the product that they're building. It also gives them the paint details and the overall look of the scenes. From the model, you create the plans. That relates to how the pieces have to come up through the floor in terms of its relation with other pieces which fly in from the flies. You have draperies, over 13 sets of draperies which are flown in and out. The draperies don't just fly in and out, but they also swag and trip and festoon, travel, track. I mean, it doesn't end. It's probably the most complex show in the world at the moment.
We're on the fly floor of the Pantages. We're looking out into the stage house, and there are 61 fly sets here, and Phantom uses most of these sets.
Once inside the real theater, technical director Peter Lamb and his team have to make sure that everything works.
The flyman is trimming some of the sets right now. You can see them going by.
Whether flying from above or firmly planted on the stage, the sets are the creation of the scenic designers. They take the neutral space of the stage, and in the words of associate set designer Jonathan Allen, they create an experience that exists very much in the imagination of the audience.
I think an audience should be using their imagination. They're probably not conscious of it, but you should be pushing them a little. And that's probably what takes that step between an ordinary show and something a bit more magical, just pushing it that further. I've tended to find the simplest designs, or what appear to be the simplest designs, often are the most difficult to achieve. The Lake of Candles in Phantom, for instance. There, it just looks like 100-odd candles coming out of a stage. Well, each one has its own little flap, so that's got to be machined. They're all supported on trusses. There are machines to bring it out. There are computers to control them.
We're in the trap room under the stage, and what you're looking at is row after row of scenery for Phantom. All of this machinery is operated by direct current motors and controlled by a computer. And on go, it will rise through the floor of the stage and create one of the most exciting scenes in theatrical history.
What the audience sees looks very simple and very elegant. And that's partly also to do with what I like about theatre. that sense of deception that something appears easy but actually is very difficult.
Our touring sets have their own innovative and distinct technological systems. And while they are operated differently than those you've just seen, our touring show is identical to the physical production in Toronto, London, or Broadway. The final effect and what you see on stage is the same. Not only are the sets designed, in theater, even the sound has to be designed. In a show like Phantom, sound quality is critical to the audience's enjoyment. Sound designer Martin Levan has been very careful to preserve the original sound.
Very often in a theatre, it's very hard to amplify sounds and keep them very natural. And of course, if you don't keep the sounds natural, then the audience think they're listening to a tape, or they don't believe the performers saying what they're saying, and the message doesn't come across so well. The show is radio mic'd. Every performer wears a little radio mic, and these are positioned around their wigs, usually. Each instrument has a channel of its own, and each channel can be controlled volume-wise, and we have processing in the desk to make the sound brighter, duller, darker. It gets so complicated these days that we also use computers to help us mix the show. There's a lot of mystery and in the show, and quite a lot of the sounds have to come from behind the theatre walls, from out of the ceiling. The Phantom moves around the house, and we hear his voice quite often without him being on the stage. And you'll hear sounds drifting in the house, in the air, and you won't know where they're coming from.
Lighting is one of the most powerful tools of theater. Associate lighting designer Howard Eaton, who has worked in film and television, is very aware of the differences when it comes to stage.
Television, you present the viewer, the audience, with exactly what you want them to see. Close-ups, wide shots, locations, backgrounds, characters, and you can tell what they're supposed to be thinking by their reactions, and it's all very much laid out for the audience. There's not so much thinking to do. In theatre, you give a wide shot the whole time, and the audience can look at what they want, see what they want, and interpret it in a way they want. It's what modern lighting is all about, controlling what the audience see and how they see it.
We're doing the number, right? Whoever sings stage right should just make sure you get there.
During dress rehearsals, the show takes its final form.
You start off, you bang it on right, and you go like that, don't you? Then leave it up. Do the thing like that, we'll see what happens. Do the whole thing like this.
The actors have become their characters. They know how they'll move on stage. All the work of the shops, the choreographers, the wig makers, and the designers is about to come together.
They're not ready. I knew they weren't ready, but I didn't know if they were in the building.
There's a tension in the air as the pieces of this giant jigsaw puzzle are painstakingly fitted together. Once we go into the theater, time becomes precious as we count down the days to opening night.
Whoops. All right, hold it a minute, please. Now, what is the cue to bring this elephant out? Because it's too late.
Once we were at the Pantages, you know, you're dealing with sets and costumes and lights and hydraulic lifts and trap doors and jumps and ropes and pyrotechnics and the orchestra and dressers and all of the elements, all the pieces of the puzzle that, you know, that go together to make it a whole. So by the time we got to the Pantages, it's a whole nother animal.
All right, can we go on? Please take your lights out and let's go into this cue. And ladies, remember, you're buzzing and making lots of happy noise, little sparrows.
Actors are human. This show is immensely stressful, and no one is immune from accident or illness. Each role has two understudies who can go on at a moment's notice. Many an actor got his or her first big break when the star fell ill. In Phantom, the role of Christine is so vocally and physically demanding that an alternate actress is needed for at least 2 performances each week. June Crowley shares the role of Christine with Patty Cohenauer.
It's a true triple threat piece of work. You must sing, you must dance, you must act. And I liken it to an athletic event. It's very much training for a marathon. Emotionally, the challenge of the role involves, you have to make an emotional and spiritual transition throughout every show. And it's a complete, consuming, all-encompassing experience.
But the real magic of theater is the feeling that you get when you're watching a performer, and all of a sudden there's a sense of stopping of time, and electricity goes through the air. And it's a lot of work, but those moments make it worth it. It's incredible. It's like nothing else exists. You're in a void except for this tremendous energy and excitement and empathy. It's spectacular. I'm real pleased to be an actor. Very proud of it.
For those of you who are thinking of pursuing a career in theater, I hope we've given you an idea of the many different talents that go into making a single production. Perhaps now it will be easier for you to see where you fit in. For those of you who have other career plans, well, I'm sure this look behind the scenes will heighten your enjoyment of the show. As you have seen, despite the glamour and the bright lights, being a part of the theater is a job much like any other. A job that requires hard work, teamwork, dedication, commitment, and consistency night after night. But all the sweat and the tears are forgotten at that magic moment when the house lights dim and the curtain rises. As for me, I'll complete my makeup, put on the mask, and in a few hours, I'll see you again as the Phantom of the Opera.
I'm bowing to say, here it is, this is all I can give you, it was my best. And so it's a wonderful moment of both giving and receiving on each side. So it's really quite wonderful.
And you just want to stand there and bow to them and just sort of revel in the warmth of their response.
You can feel the connection between you and the audience. It's about celebrating having shared a new experience together, and that's what the magic of theater is, I think.